Perfect. So I want to thank you again for taking the time out to do this with me today, Dr. Boateng. I know that you have a great story, and I think that it's going to help a lot of students just to hear it out. So I will, before we dive into the interview, I guess you can go ahead and try and introduce yourself a bit.
Yeah, definitely. And thanks for having me today. I am Dr. Stephen Boateng. Currently, I am a manager at Daiichi Sankyo in oncology. So I work in the commercial training and development team, primarily supporting breast cancer and gastric cancer. I always like to tell people that I was born in Ghana, and so that's really where my roots are from. And I got into healthcare because I have a sister who lives with sickle cell. So that's kind of what got me started in healthcare and really has helped me get to where I am today. A big part of, my journey really involves, of course, like, going through undergrad and in pharmacy school. So I did go to school in Idaho, at Idaho State University College of Pharmacy. And then after that, I went through the Rutgers Pharmaceutical Industry Fellowship Program for 2 years, where I spent some time in a global role in training and development at Bayer Pharmaceutical. And then I transitioned to a full-time role at Daiichi Sankyo, like I said earlier.
Yeah, and that's amazing. I mean, a lot of students, we always want the fellowships, and we're always thinking about life after school. So to be able to interview someone with such high standards, I'm honored to be here today.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
No problem at all. So we'll dive right into it. I always kind of like to start the interviews off with a general question just to kind of break the ice. So my question for you is that in this new dawn of working remotely, what is the number one skill you think is important to have, whether you're a student, fellow, or pharmacist working in the industry?
It's a great question. I wish you had given me two, but I think if you're looking for the number one,
no, you can go ahead and take two. You can take two of them. It's okay.
All right, I'll take two then. I'll take two.
Okay.
But I think the number one skill, in all honesty, is having excellent writing skills. And you're probably wondering what I mean by that. And what I'm really referring to is writing or communication skills, right? So in this virtual world now, I think about, your question asked for students, fellows, and pharmacists, but for those of us that work in the industry, in the past, pre-pandemic, in the office, you could just walk up to someone's desk and ask these simple questions. For now, everything is coming in, as an email, or as an IM, or even sometimes as a text. So I think it's super, super important that we all develop that excellent writing and communication skills, because things can be misinterpreted, or things can be dragged really, really for a very long time if that communication isn't up to par. So I think that is a big skill that even for students and fellows too, everybody's at home primarily. So I think that's a big skill that everybody should have as the number one. I kind of, jokingly asked for two because I'm always torn if I ever get this question, because I think the other skill for me is time management.
Yeah, I hear that.
And that really applies to everybody. I think especially being in the virtual world, sometimes you might be caught off guard, even overworking, or even finding struggles to prioritize what needs to be done at certain times. So I think it's always important for us to take a step back, reflect, pay attention to our time and what we're devoting our time to make sure we're having an overall healthy relationship, even with our work and even with our personal life too. So I think that skill is also important.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, honestly and true, I definitely agree with the time management. It's definitely just coming from being a student and trying to just take on so many responsibilities. It's hard to keep up with a lot of the things that you have to do. Kind of gets overwhelming. So I couldn't agree more with the time management. So thank you for that. Next question is, it's well known that in industry, we have the four main functional areas, and that's being clinical development, regulatory, medical affairs, and marketing. However, what you do is kind of a slight step away from the norm. Can you briefly explain what you do, what a normal day looks like for you, and how you got into it?
It's a great question. So like you said, most of the time when we think about industry and the functional areas, you're hearing clinical development, regulatory, medical affairs, or marketing. What I do, so I work in the commercial space, right? But my role is in training and development. And so I like to actually start from where you ended the question, right? how did I get into it? I think for me, the reason why I got into training and development is because, even as a child, I always loved teaching, coaching, and training. And so a big part of the job that I do now involves utilizing those skills. I'm actually a soccer coach as well. I did play soccer in college too. So I loved soccer and I have coached soccer for so much time, but I always realized that even the skills that, even if it's on a soccer field, that you get over there, you can always bring it into the classroom, and being a professor or being a teacher or being working in training like I do now, those skills can be used in the classroom and even in the work that I do right now. And so that's kind of what really inspired me to get into training and development, because I really had that passion for teaching, coaching, and training. And so let me just expand and tell you more about what I do. And so, the way that I think about it is, I think I mentioned briefly that I did a global fellowship at Bear in training and development. But primarily, when you think about the pharmaceutical industry, the people who are the customer facing people that are helping, for lack of a better term, sell the products that we have or the medications are the sales reps. And so the question I always like to ask people is, how are these sales reps able to talk to doctors so confidently and know the science and the data? Who is teaching them that? And the answer is, that's what I do. So my job is to make sure that primarily our commercial facing employees or sales reps, so you might hear them being called so many different names, right? I'd like to say, we call them oncology territory managers. My job is to make sure that they are trained from a product training perspective, so they're very confident with that. And so, think about us as pharmacists, right? My job is whether it's helping them understand disease state, mechanism of action, drug interactions, competitive information around, the competitor's drug, how it works, what does their data look like? How would you interpret that data? That is really my job. And so, a big part of my job really involves collaborating with all those different groups you mentioned before. It is an atypical job and I love doing it. So I usually spend, or our team, we usually spend a big part of our job working collaboratively with medical and legal to make sure we're building all these modules and assessments. And once those things are developed, we will take them and make sure they are appropriate to be used to train the sales reps from a compliance perspective. They are up to standard. And so, we usually have new hires that will come on board, which are like new sales reps coming on board. So I spend, a couple of weeks with them. Like, think about being a teacher in a classroom, really helping them from the basics, So I do primarily now gastric cancer. So my job is helping them understand, what is gastric cancer? What is the prognosis of gastric cancer? How is it being treated now? And so I really help them get and understand that. And then I move them all the way to understanding that, the product that I work on is approved for gastric cancer. Now I need to help them understand how that drug works. How does it fit in the line of therapy for gastric cancer? What are the safety information? What is our efficacy data? And all the potential questions or objections that they might get from doctors. How can we help these sales reps be confident in answering these questions? So that's a big part of my job that I do. I'm always using my scientific knowledge from a pharmacist perspective. So it's always fun doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that just speaks volumes to how diverse the industry world is. It's just like, there's so much to it. There's so much that you can do it. And there's like, even the different avenues that people don't even think of, kind of like you. So, I mean, thank you for sharing your story. I really appreciate that. I'll dive right into the next question, and it's more our back on what you do. What do you like most about what you do, and what about the least?
It's a great question. I think that one thing I love most about the job that I do is I am constantly learning, right? And so again, this is kind of where my pharmacist hat always comes on. I always have to keep up to date. If we have new data coming, I have to make sure that I know it and I understand it, so that when I have new sales reps, I can confidently train them. Another big part of my job too that I didn't mention too is I also help train, think about the whole company, right? All the people that do not work in oncology. How do we make sure that they understand the oncology landscape that we're working in Daiichi Sankyo? Because I spend a big part of my time also running some of these lunch and learns and helping people at the company in general understand that. So a big part of the things that I do that I really enjoy is always learning and really using that scientific knowledge to help other people understand our product and even the competitive landscape. The second part of your question was asking what I like least, right? About what I do right now.
Exactly.
It's a great question. One of my first mentors when I entered the industry, my boss at Bayer, he told me something. He said, work is called work for a reason. And so the reason why I say that is the least part of my job is there's a lot of documentation and tracking, and it comes with a job, but it's always good to be honest and know that it's not always like, fun and dandy, but there are certain things that you just need to get it done to be on the safer side. So, especially working in the commercial space, we have to make sure that, we're keeping track of everything that we're doing, that we can update everything. And so for me, I think I know you said what's least fun. I think it can sometimes feel like being tedious, having to track everything, but I do acknowledge the importance of it, because there have been certain cases where, because I was able to track stuff, it made it easier for me to retrieve data and quickly share it with somebody. So that's the least fun part of the job, but work is called work for a reason. So there's some parts of the job that you just have to get done, and there's a method to the madness, and there's a reason why we do those things. So that's what I would say.
Got you. I'm definitely gonna take that quote from your mentor. Work is work. That couldn't be more honest. But but it is true. To your first point as well. So thank you for your answer. Next question is that many people who are interested in a career in the pharmaceutical industry, including myself, we kind of paint this picture on what to expect based on what we hear and what we read from it. So for you, what is something that you imagine that actually held true about the industry pharmacy after you got in, and what is something that you were not necessarily prepared for?
It's a great question. I think that I'll lay the foundation and say that, for me, my career path, I always say it's the atypical one. So I didn't have any industry rotational experience, and those are always great to have, but I didn't have that. So I think that coming into the industry, I really had this open mind mindset where it's like, I'm open to whatever comes my way. But one thing that I heard a lot about was the flexibility about hours, right? And being able to have your weekends off, or being able to, take days off and do other things. And so for me, one thing that, I'm very passionate about is, I think I told you about sickle cell. So I do a lot of advocacy work, and, I have my own nonprofit and do all of that. And so it was something that I really liked hearing people talk about, the fact that, you get time off to be able to focus on all the different things that maybe you might want to do outside of work. And I always tell people that I don't think there's one person on this world who can tell us that they have only one passion. I don't think anybody has one passion. So I have other passions too. So when I heard people always saying, working in industry, you're going to get flexibility with hours, you're going to get your weekends off, I think that was one thing I was really looking forward to. And it did hold true. I've been blessed enough where, even working full time, I'm still able to carry on with like my foundation, like I said, and even having multiple speaker events at different places. And it gives me that flexibility. And I think that still holds true. One thing that I would say that, I think you're asking kind of caught me off guard, or I wasn't really expecting. I would say is the cross-functional approach to industry. So I think, for me, because I didn't have that prior experience coming in, I didn't really know what that was about. And so what I'm really talking about is working in industry involves you collaborating and working with a lot of different stakeholders. And so, I work in the commercial space, but I'm constantly working with medical, legal. And so those things I wasn't previewed to, and, nobody really told me about it. So it's kind of new and shocking to me in the beginning, but I really appreciate it. And fun fact, now working at Daiichi Sankyo, I look back and some of my colleagues who were past fellows with me at Rutgers, they're some of my medical colleagues now. And so I always look back, I'm like, I build those relationships at Rutgers, and those relationships are still helping me do my job. But it's something that I wasn't really informed about coming in. And I think it was new. It was a new learning curve for me, but I'm glad I was able to take it on and learn the importance of working collaboratively.
Yeah, honestly and truly, thank you for that. I think that's really important. I think that a lot of people who, I feel like everyone hears about the weekends, and that's one of the main attractive things about the industry pharmacy. So glad to hear that that held true, and I think it's important for us to be ready for anything like that. So my next question is for you. So how I even met you, or where I first got introduced to you, was at the Howard University symposium, and that's when you kind of did your whole presentation on presenting, especially in this online environment. So that's why I want, and I mean I took away so much from that. So I just kind of wanted you to share a couple of gems as well. So my next question for you is, knowing that presentation is a huge part of what we do, no matter if you're a licensed pharmacist, fellow, or student, could you just give us 2 quick tips about online presentations?
Yeah, definitely. I'm all about how can we always improve our presentation and public speaking skills. So I think the first thing I always like to share is, irrespective, whether you're a student, a fellow, pharmacist, whatever, you always have to know your audience. You could be given one topic, and based off of your audience, the slides or whatever you put together is going to be different. So my number one is always know your audience. I think if you know your audience, it makes what you're about to present or speak about efficient, and it also helps your audience really understand that you care about them. I think that's the number one thing. Always know your audience. The second one is one of my favorite quotes that I've kind of coined. I always say, do your thinking upfront. And so you might be wondering, what do I mean by that? What I mean is, spend time really learning and practicing your content. And so the reason why I say do your thinking upfront is, by practicing and spending time really knowing your content, you give your brain one less thing to worry about. Because, when it comes to presenting, public speaking, all of these different things, your brain is going to try and evaluate all the different things, right? So a lot of times when people reach out to me, they're asking me a lot about, I'm always nervous, or I feel like I'm shaking, or I feel like I can't cover everything on the slide. And I always say the nerves are always going to be there. Some of these things are always going to be there. Your brain is going to try and navigate all of those things. The best thing you can do for your brain is really practice and know your content. Again, do your thinking up front. If you do that, you're giving your brain one less thing to worry about, and all that other things can take care of themselves. So those are my 2 gems. The number one is know your audience, and number 2 is do your thinking up front, which means really practicing and knowing your content.
Yep, and I couldn't agree more, especially coming from like trying to get into the industry pharmacy world and taking all these opportunities like internships. Like I see the importance of presenting, so I really do appreciate that. And I did want a quick shout out. I know it's the Hampton and Howard symposium. Shout out to Gabe and Mitch about that. It's just not just Howard. But we want to wrap up the interview with kind of like asking the same question, just to kind of get different perspectives. And that question is, I'm sure you answered it before, but if you could go back and talk to a younger you, knowing all that you know now, what is one piece of advice that you will give yourself?
I love this question. I think what I would tell to my younger self is, things will always work out. And you're probably wondering why I'm saying that. I think, and I look back, and I feel like it's forever ago when I graduated, but I look back when I was in school, you're always trying to do all these things, practice and prepare, seek internships and all of these things. And sometimes you start questioning yourself, am I really going to get that job that I really want? Am I really going to get that internship? Am I going to get this and that? And one thing that I feel like, it's always important for us to remember is, we, especially, speaking for the pharmacists and pharmacy students, we really do the hard work. We spend the time in the classroom, do IPPEs, APPEs. So we really do all the hard work that we need to prepare us for success. So I think I'll tell my younger self that things are always going to work out, because that preparation and that time that I've spent really working hard to get to where I am is going to prove, and I'm going to get what I deserve. And so, I'm not going to stress too much and just remind myself that things are always going to work out. That's what I always say.
Yeah, I hear that, and that's another important message as well. You've been dropping gems all night, but definitely that one more than any, because I mean, a lot of us we just, we kind of get stuck in our own head. and worried about the future. So yeah, we really appreciate you. Again, I want to thank you for taking up the time for doing this with me. I appreciate it. I know that many around the world, not around the world, but anyone who's going to listen is going to appreciate it. But yeah, just thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And I knew, like I said, I always want to make sure that I can give back to the profession that got me started too. So whichever way I can help, and hopefully for everyone listening, there are some key takeaways that you took from this, and hopefully will help you throughout your career journey, no matter where you are.
Perfect. Thank you so much.